do with independent Ireland. So they released the manifesto today, and there's some of it good. And I would say personally, I'm not that fond of independent Ireland. When it first was started, I had a lot of faith in it. We're going to give it a shot. And if I was here back when the European election was, I was going to give Ciaran Maloney my number one. And I'll get into all that now. But long story short, I've lost a lot of respect for independent Ireland, particularly with Ciaran Maloney. Who ran for independent Ireland, my constituency, in the European election, and went off to Brussels. He was elected to Brussels, and he was supposed to be for the voices and the people, the independent people in the country, and he went off and joined Fianna Fáil's coalition, the European Union. So I don't get that. He might as well run for Fianna Fáil, in my opinion. He might as well run as Fianna Fáil than independent Ireland, because he just joined Fianna Fáil, which I think is unforgivable, to be totally honest. There's no point saying that the government destroying rural Ireland, etc. So that'd be like me going off and joining Fianna Fáil now. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it for love of money. Simple as that. Because they've destroyed the country. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have destroyed the country, and I wouldn't do it. Simple as that. And I know he said as an independent he can do very little, etc., etc. But this is my own personal belief, just before I go any further, because I know people would say about it. And I know a lot of people who voted for independent Ireland, they feel very disgusted with them at the moment, particularly with Ciaran Maloney. They do feel very disgusted. A lot of them do feel very forgotten, etc., etc. But long story short, and then obviously being a former OT, and then he apologised to OT too for bad mouthing them, etc. Like, let's put it this way: he's not going to get. If he ever comes looking for a vote for the European Parliament again, he's not going to get one of me. He might have before, but thankfully I was in Finland at the time, because I would feel very betrayed if I did vote for him. I would have felt very betrayed. I'd be very angry with him. And rightly so, and everybody has because he never said it before. I never heard of him saying I was going to join Fianna Fáil once I get into the Parliament, in the European Union. I never heard him saying that. But anyway, that's my own personal issues, I suppose, Ciaran Maloney and independent Ireland. But I do think Michael Collins has potential, etc., etc., leader of independent Ireland, etc., etc. And then obviously we have the three others, Richard Donoghue from Limerick, TD, spoke up a good few times for farmers, etc., etc. I have a lot of respect for him too. But Ciaran Maloney has really destroyed independent Ireland. But we see what. But I want to get into the manifesto. Just as my own personal, just because I know people would ask me about it, and I just want to address that before I move on any further. So they have pledged independent Ireland that to be a tram line for all the 26 counties. So what they mean by that is very vague at the moment. What they mean, a light rail service, which to me sounds like a tram, what we would call a Lewis, I suppose, too, in Dublin. Which is good. I've always said about Cavan Town, particularly, just again for the argument, it will cost hundreds of billions. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be a cheap thing if they ever do. I don't know where they're going to get the money for it. I know they probably say they use the Apple tax, they use this, etc., etc. And I do admit there's some towns, like, for example, Galway, and people are talking about Cork too getting a tram or a Lewis line around Cork City or Galway, take for example. They were talking. The Green Party was talking about that themselves too. And obviously they were saying about flooding too, when the floods come in, etc., etc. in Cork. It's no point having trams when they're flooded. But it obviously would cost hundreds of millions. It costs hundreds of millions to get the tracks, get it all sorted out, the trains itself, etc., etc. It would cost a lot of money. And again, majority of cities, just going back to Finland, etc., etc., a lot of the main cities have trams, have good public transport, and that's why a lot of people don't have cars, etc., because they're good public transport systems, the underground, etc., etc. So more very developed. And I do think it would work in Cavan if we had a few trams. I'm not saying we have 100 trams going along all the streets in Cavan, but in the town centre, Cavan town itself, I do think it would be very good, particularly for elderly people. Because there's a lot of elderly people I know in Cavan that live in Cavan Town. They have to walk up all the way up to the other side of Cavan Town to do their shopping or to go somewhere. And it would be a lot handy if they could get on the tram. And I know there's some buses, but it'd be a lot handy if they could get on a tram and just go up the road in the tram for a few euros. It'd be a lot handy. I do think it would work, in particularly the main street in Cavan. It would work. I do think it would work along with, like, the main street going up by Dunstores, etc. So the main one-way street in the town. If we made that a tram line and the Farnham Street was still left for cars, because again the town is chock blocked. Today, before I came home from work, just actually before I made this video, I was holed up in traffic nearly for a half an hour in Cavan Town because the schools get out at 1 o'clock, and the traffic's still there because obviously then the primary schools get out. So when I get out early at 3 o'clock on a Friday, it's quite insane. Like, the traffic's still lying, and there's people going, especially coming up to the Christmas time, people are doing shopping, buying Christmas. It's insane. But long story short, it would reduce the traffic flow in Cavan, because there's a huge problem with the traffic flow, because it's just not well designed. The town from back in the day, not so much nowadays. But I do think it would work, but it would cost hundreds of billions. So I would want to know from independent Ireland, where would they get the money for it? Because it would be a lot of money. Now, don't get me wrong, as I say, in Cavan would work. It probably would work in Cavan. I'm not going to lie to you, it would work, require a lot of money, require a lot of funding, but I do think it would work in theory. It would. And I do think people in Cavan would like it, to be told, I'd say. And not to mention then obviously the other bigger cities in the country. But as I say, 26 counties is a lot. It's like not just focus on one area. It'd be a huge amount of money. And then they talk about WED for frontline workers, subsidies for frontline workers. So what they mean by frontline workers is nurses, obviously doctors, members from Garda Síochána, etc., etc. So yeah, obviously I think that's a no-brainer too. I think there should be subsidies for doctors and nurses. They do it in Canada, and at the moment there was a few nurses from Cavan, take for example, back a while ago, back 2 years ago. A Canadian company came over here for nursing homes, etc., etc. And they were like, if you come to Canada now, we'll give you a free apartment so you can stay. And that was a no-brainer for the nurses. They straight away, since they had a free apartment along with pay at the end of the week. So they were given a free apartment, so they enticed them to come over because that's what happened. A lot of young nurses come out of college in the HSE, so a lot of them left their jobs to go to Canada. Take example, I know we talked many times about Canada and Australia, but that's what happened in Cavan a few years ago. A nursing home crowd in Canada came over and said, we have apartments for people to, we give them to them as long as they work with us. So I don't know. It's good in theory. I would love to see it, but about. Because I know Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have been crying about this for years, saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but they've never done anything at all. The next issue I'm going to raise, and I said this many times, and I have an issue with this, and Fianna Fáil is talking about creating a new Department of Security for cyber security, etc., which still should be in the Department of Defence. It shouldn't be a whole new group. So they're talking about something like in the United States, as we say at the moment, Department of Efficiency. So basically to do with the cut back in NGOs, which I agree, NGOs fucking ridiculous amount of money to get. Would watch the government spending, etc., etc., the Department of Efficiency and Reform. But this is the thing. It's all right in saying we're going to establish a new department, etc., etc., but it takes billions. You have to get a headquarters, you have to get staff, you have to set up a whole organisation, computers, etc. You'd be nearly out 2 or 3 billion, or 4 or 5 billion on setting up a department. Because it takes a lot to set up a department. It's not that you click your fingers. And because you have to pay staff, you have to pay for buildings, take for example, for the Department of Efficiency. Say for example, it did come to fruition. In Cavan you would want to have a building or somewhere else in the country, so you would have to have multiple buildings, so pay rent or buy the building out, so you'd be out hundreds of millions or hundreds of billions on setting it up. And again, especially in this country, nothing really ever changes, unfortunately. It's all well and good saying it, but the majority of cases, we've seen them in tribunal after tribunal. It's a different thing to the department. But long story short, money just fucked at it, and nothing ever came forward. They told us already what we know, if that makes any sense. I know they're talking about the NGOs, and NGOs do need to be cut. It's an insane amount of money. They get hundreds of billions a year. It go to deliver 10% of savings on the government. It costs 40. So it does say in the manifesto. Sorry, I beg pardon. It costs 45 million to establish the new department. It would cost a lot of money. That's a lot of money. 45 just to establish it, just to get it organised. I'm not even saying about a paycheck for staff. How many staff would you have in it, working in it? Other stuff too. Other expenses. Is take for example, if you were renting the building out, take for example in Cavan, to be the Cavan branch of it, take for example, you're looking at a few thousand there every year. So if you add all that up, you'd be looking at maybe $1 billion. If you nearly would probably, especially in the first few years, because obviously they get established, etc., etc. So I don't know. It's the same with the Department of Security. I suppose we're going to call it Fianna Fáil. It's better to have it because there's already the Department of Defence. I wouldn't mind if there's no such thing as the Department of Defence, but I do think that should be incorporated into the Department of Defence instead of another department that does nothing really, unfortunately. So it does. They just go back to the So it does pledge to reduce the VAT to 9% for hospitality. Again, that's no brainer. Businesses are struggling, small business, cafes, etc., are struggling. That's a no brainer. Nobody really can argue with that. I don't think there's anybody in the country that could argue saying we should keep it at 13%. I don't think there's anybody. But there's obviously other stuff to talking about the water plants. We still have to get around to that at some point talking about it. But there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot, in these manifestos I could go on for hours. I'm just going to give you the brief summary, what I take. But particularly, again, why I won't be voting for Shane P. O'Reilly, he's the candidate in Cavan for Independent Ireland. It's because to put it straight to Independent Ireland, I mean no offence to Shane P. O'Reilly, he was in Fianna Fáil a few years ago, he left Fianna Fáil, he seen Fianna Fáil for what it was, that was a rotten party to the core. And in fairness, he did leave. He was a long time in Fianna Fáil, and he did leave. In fairness, I give him credit for that. And Michael Collins too, etc., etc. I have no problem with them. They've done good enough work. But it's Ciaran Mullooney, and to be totally honest, that's what really poisoned the well for me. And that's just to put it straight. I mean, no offence to anybody who votes Independent Ireland, but it's just the way I see it. I couldn't foresee myself voting for Independent Ireland, particularly with Ciaran Mullooney, because I couldn't foresee, like, take for example now, if I voted for Independent Ireland, Shane Pure While he got in, take for example, and he went into coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, say the Independent Ireland got 6 or 7 seats, and they went in and they were like, yeah, go in with Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. You know, even though they could make a difference, but you know, at the end of the day, I didn't, like, say if I was here to vote in the European elections, and I voted for Ciaran Mullooney, I would rather him be an independent voice than be a Fianna Fáil voice over in Brussels. And that's what he is at the moment, he's a Fianna Fáil voice, more or less. So, that's just my total opinion, and I don't mean any offence, but it's just the way I see it. So that's what really poisoned the well for me, unfortunately. If Ciaran Mullooney didn't do what he did, I would probably support, like, give Shane Pure Wiley a good high vote. But I simply couldn't now because of it. And then there's a few other issues, obviously, too. That particularly with the terms of immigration, etc., etc. There's many other things I could say. Like, it's been with every other party, but I will talk with Shane Pure Wiley and I'll probably give a bit more backstory when that video does come out, relating to all the candidates in Cavan and Monaghan. But, yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, so I do recommend having a look at it independently. But I'm just kind of touching on the surface of what I think about it. I don't know what they mean by this, but yeah, I agree with this. Prejudice, like this, just the last point. Just what I don't know what it means by EU Defence Force. Opposes joining the EU Defence Force. That must mean the European Army, etc., etc. It's very vague, I suppose, what they mean by that. But it says, but anybody that's a foreign national, that's an Irish citizen who commits a crime after the prison sentence is at home. I have no issues with that. If they caused a serious crime, I mean, if they didn't just won a red light or something like that, something minor like that, that, you know, at the end of the day affects really nothing. If somebody attacks somebody, take for example, of course they should be sent home after the prison sentence and never let back in. I think that's a no-brainer too. I think that's literally a no-brainer. But let me know what you think. I know people disagree with me. But again, as I say, it's just my opinion. Thank you.